Welcome back to another Q&A episode. Yes, I'm wearing the same thing I wore in last week's Q&A because, I record these two at a time. Because efficiency and stuff like that. But I threw the glasses on, so at least you have something a little bit different to look at. And, we're always looking good. This shirt, I feel like it's a little revealing. Don't you guys think? I don't like buttoning the top button because I feel like that's just too, I don't know. I like being, more relaxed and opened up, showing a little chesticles. Anywho, okay. So, first question on this week's Q&A. I actually kind of did this Q&A today. I hadn't really, planned anything out, so I didn't ask for questions over on the Instagram, Ryan J. Solomon. You best be following your boy. And if you're interested in coaching from me under Revive Stronger, check out the links below. But plugs out of the way. And by the way, when I'm coaching, I'm not as... I still have my personality, of course, when I'm coaching people, and that comes through. But I'm also really serious about helping my clients out, and it's not all jokey, okay? Okay, just wanted to get that out of the way. Anywho, first question that I'm going to answer is just a frequently asked question that I see a lot, and kind of comes from the Revive Facebook group, and basically, what are some good pre-workout guidelines? And it depends, of course. Something that I heard Mr. Eric Helms talk about recently was that acute changes in your pre-workout meal probably don't impact performance a whole lot. It's probably more so what you've done the previous 24 days to replenish glycogen and that sort of thing. So the pre-workout meal might not make that big of a difference. Now, if you're dieting and those immediate carbs make you feel really good, then maybe it does matter more. But ultimately, it's about playing around with different stuff and seeing what makes you feel best while you're training. I think that in general, it's probably a pretty good idea to be mostly digested going into your meal. And one reason for this is because if you're digesting food and burning energy for that and supplying your gut with blood flow to digest this food, that's going to be competing with blood flow to your muscles and with energy to produce in your training. And let alone if you feel heavy and you feel weighed down, literally, or you have some gastric. There are some words. I can't say alphabetize. Alphabetize. I can't say that word. I don't know what's going on. Apologies. But if you're having some gastric distress and some bowel movements that are trying to make their way through while you're training, that's probably not a great thing, But on the flip side, some people like smashing a lot of food before they train, and that feels good for them. So, again, there's going to be some individual differences in what feels good for somebody. But I would say that the closer you are to your workout, the more you're going to want to avoid fats and fiber, because that's going to slow down digestion a little bit and might be a little more heavy in the gut, and the more light you're going to want that meal. More, maybe faster digesting carbs, more of a liquid protein source or a lighter protein source, something that's not going to be like a meat. I wouldn't want a stack of ribs before I go train. I'd probably need a nap after that. I would anyways. But the closer you are to your session, the more I would avoid fat and fiber. Now, say you got a couple of hours, an hour and a half, something like that, then I think that you're totally fine to have just a mixed meal of a little bit of fat, a little bit of fiber. It doesn't have to be a faster digesting carb source, I think that you're totally cool with that. And especially if you feel good in your training and you don't notice any performance decrements and stuff like that. But if I had to go like straight from work to training, and which I have had to do in the past, then I would literally just have like 30 grams of a protein shake, and I would probably pack like a granola bar or something like that. That's going to be pretty light on my stomach, and I probably won't have much fat, is what I would do if I had to train like right now. But in general, I like having a meal about an hour and a half, 2 hours before training, and I'll have not necessarily slow digesting carb source. I'll probably have like 10 to 15 grams of fat, and it'll probably be like potatoes or oats or something along those lines for my carbs, and then whatever it might be for my protein source. Like for my morning sessions, it's usually like eggs and a couple egg whites, and for my PM session, it's usually like some chicken, a little bit of oats, stuff like that. So that's kind of how I do it, but I think that maybe the more dieted you get, the maybe closer you want to push that meal towards your training, just so you're not getting hungry while you're training, because that could be distracting, and then you could start getting into MyFitnessPal while you're training, and that's probably not a good place to be while you're training. So while dieting, I'll probably push it a little bit closer to your training window. I would anyways. But I think in general, the closer you get to your training, the less fat and fiber I would have. And the further away, I'll just probably make it more of a mixed meal and not worry about it a whole lot. As for intra-workout, there is some literature that tends to support that some intra-workout carbs can be beneficial from a muscle damage standpoint and from a potential performance standpoint. And this might be the case because it might provide your body a little bit of a signal that, hey, we have incoming energy, so we can access our stored energy a little bit better. Like, you always have enough stored energy. Even someone that is like 3 or 4% body fat, you have enough energy from fat stores. But while we're training, we're not going to be able to access that energy in a timely enough fashion. All right? Because we're going to want more of that, our anaerobic systems working a little bit more. We're going to want our stored glycogen to help us out a little bit more, rather than that stored, then solely relying on our stored fat. Like, for a lot of these things, it's not an on or off. Like, we don't only use stored carbohydrate when we're doing high intensity stuff. It's usually almost always a mix of both. And if you're interested in like some really cool physiology stuff, Dr. Andy Galpin has a lot of really cool videos up on his YouTube channel. That, disclaimer, I help him edit some of that stuff, so just throwing that out there. But like, I'm just saying that because it's really good information, and I've also learned this stuff in my advanced physiology courses as well. But while you're training, some intra-workout carbs might provide that, hey, we have a little bit of incoming energy, so we can use some more of our stored energy because we have incoming energy. And it also might help with maintaining like blood glucose levels, that we have less stored glycogen and glucose in our blood, so that might help maintain those levels, which could help with performance. And we might get a little bit of a insulin response, which could potentially mitigate muscle damage while we're training a little bit. So if your session's over much more than 45 minutes to an hour, I do like, sipping on a little bit of carbs throughout that session for those reasons. And I personally like doing it, but like, if your session's like under 50 minutes to an hour, are you really going to need it? Probably not. I mean, it still might be beneficial, and certain individuals might benefit from it more, especially like considering the placebo effect. But I think that you probably are going to see diminishing returns on using an intra-workout supplement the shorter your workouts are, or especially the less intense they are. But much over an hour, I do like having, 25 to 45 grams of carbs in a Gatorade solution, or not in a Gatorade solution, in a liquid form. And I just do Gatorade because it's nice and cheap. Huge tip for all you people in college like myself, or anybody else that just wants to save a buck. Always get the powdered form of a lot of these, whatever it is, Gatorade, Powerade, just this sugary stuff that you might have in an intra workout. When you're shopping, make sure to get the powdered form in a bigger case, because that's going to be a lot less expensive than having to get a 6-pack or 12-pack of actual Gatorades in the little plastic containers. All right, so powdered form, big tip there. Trust me, because I would get the 12 packs all the time and just bring a Gatorade to the gym, which it's nice and convenient, but just shake up some powder in your little blender bottle here, all right? But that's kind of how I would approach my pre-workout and intra-workout. Now, I might as well cover post-workout since we're on the topic. Post-workout, I would just make sure to get 30 grams plus of a quality protein source. And then I think what you do with your carbs and fats might not matter a ton in the context of training once a day. If you're training twice a day, like myself, you might want to make sure that there's especially some carbs in that meal. But my twice daily sessions are 8 to 10 hours apart. So I'm not necessarily worried as much about a super fast digesting carb source, because they're still quite a ways apart. But if you're training again in 4 to 6 hours, then you're probably going to want to be on it with a fast digesting source. But in the context of training once a day, I think as long as you're getting, some post-workout protein, that you don't have to worry about your carb and fat breakdown as much. That said, I think there might be some benefits to having a decent sized meal post-workout. And I say this because it might help you get into that parasympathetic state a little bit more. So that's kind of your rest and digest state compared to being stressed out and get shit done state. And I say this because you have a big meal, you're nice and fed, you might sit down for a while. All those things can help you chill out a little bit more. And don't quote me on this, but I believe that there's some literature on the faster that you can kind of get yourself into this parasympathetic state after training, the better performance outcomes you can see. And I'm not sure if this was in hypertrophy related stuff. I do not know the study offhand, but I am moderately to very confident that there was research on this, and the faster that you can kind of get into this parasympathetic state after training, then the better off you are in terms of training adaptations. And I think that having this bigger meal after training can really help you out with that. So I would lean towards having a pretty good sized mixed meal of having some protein, carbs, and fats in there. That's kind of the route I would go for those reasons. But I would just make sure at the very least to, still get at least 30 grams of a nice quality protein source. And then if you're training twice a day, maybe you make sure to hit it with faster digesting carb source as well. And another frequently asked question from the Revive group is tracking vegetables and whether you should track them or not. Because some vegetables have certain types of fiber in them that aren't necessarily digestible, so you kind of might not use as many of the calories from those fibers, but then your body can also like adapt to breaking down those fibers. And it's a lot of complex like digestion stuff that a lot of it goes over my head, to be honest, because we get into gut microflora and how it adapts over time. And I don't think even like the gut health experts like Gabriella Fundaro, I believe I'm pronouncing her name ish, right? But she's an RP coach, PhD, smart gal that knows her stuff. And she even mentions a lot like, man, we just don't know a ton about the gut and stuff like that at this point, and how, whether it can adapt to being able to use more of those calories from fiber and stuff like that. So it gets complex. So my answer to should you track your vegetables? Well, if you're already tracking, like whether you should track calories or not is a whole other story. But if you're already tracking, should you track vegetables as well? And I think in most scenarios, yes. Yes, I would. I would just track everything. I think it's just easier that way. And I would especially do so in a dieting state or the closer you get to a competition show, something like that. Now, if you are maintaining or if you are going through a gaining phase and your vegetable intake is pretty consistent from day to day and there's not a lot of fluctuations and you have your vegetable intake within reason, so like you're not having 6 servings of vegetable at each meal, then you probably don't have to, especially if it's consistent from day to day, and because that's probably only going to be a 50 to 100 calorie fluctuation if you're within a certain level of veggies every day. But I would also be careful with that because that could open up the box of doing that with every food you eat. And if you did that with every food you eat, you could pretty easily eat an extra 500 calories on a certain day, depending on what you do. And then you could put yourself in a pretty big surplus without really even knowing it. And that might not have the best results. So through a gaining or maintaining phase, if it's relatively consistent and it's just annoying for you to track, then it's probably fine, especially if you're able to gain at the rate you want to anyways, and you're hitting your protein intake, your carbs, and all that, your nutrient timing is pretty good, and you're gaining at the rate you want, then great, go for gold, do what you got to do. But in general, if you're tracking anyways, I would recommend just tracking them. And the next question is, what does training look like during a cut? But we're already like pushing 20 minutes here, and that question's probably going to take me like 15 minutes. So make sure you're subscribed for a upcoming Q&A episode to where I answer that one. But let's find one that's not going to take me like a year long, because you guys know how I work. I like to answer these bad boys in depth, and leave your questions below for future questions that you want answered, and I'll give you a shout out and I will appreciate it. But here's one I'll go with. If prescribed X reps in reserve, should that stay consistent across sets? So like if you're programming and your program says, okay, I'm going to shoot for 2 reps in reserve for this exercise, should you maintain that across sets? Or should you shoot for that on your first set and then just try to keep your reps and maintain reps across sets? Or what should you do there? So of course, it depends on what your goal is and what your coach is telling you and that sort of thing. But when I prescribe reps in reserve for an exercise, it's across all sets. So if you got 4 sets, high bar back squats, 10 reps, 2 RIR, reps in reserve, then I want 2 RIR each and every set. All 4 sets of 10, I want 2 reps left in the tank. And if that means that, say you're doing 250 pounds, your first set, 2 RIR. Second set, 2 reps in reserve. Third set, you get to rep number 8 and you're like, damn, I think I probably only got 1 more rep before I'm at that 2 RIR. Then I want you to do 1 more rep and cap that at 9 reps and leave it at 2 reps in reserve. Now, in this last set, I wouldn't care if you did either of these next two options. Either doing 225 again for 8 or 9 reps, I think that's fine. Or 250 again for 8 or 9 reps, I think that's fine. Or alternatively, you could do like drop 10 to 15 pounds off the bar, 10 to 20 pounds off the bar, and complete another set at 2 reps in reserve for 10 to 11 or 12 reps, depending on how much load you take off. All 4 of those options, in the context of just purely training for hypertrophy, I'll be cool with. But I would want you to keep that reps in reserve consistent across all your sets. And I would choose your load to keep you within a reasonable rep range to hit that reps in reserve. So if I prescribe 10 reps at 2 RIR, I probably wouldn't want you doing much less than 8 reps on a per set basis or much more than 11 or 12. But I would still either do more reps or less reps for a given load to hit that reps in reserve on a per set basis. And should you drop reps across sets? Like, does that mean you're working hard if on your first set you got after it and then you just let reps fall off? Well, I think it depends on where you're at in your training cycle and what your reps in reserve are on your first set. Like, if you're in your final week of your training cycle and you are taking a lot of things to failure, then yeah, I think that your reps across sets are probably going to fall a decent amount. But some people, like a lot of females, can just keep repping it out close to failure. But like me, on my like RDLs or something like that, if I did one set of 10 to like failure on those, my next set, I shit you not, I would be able to do like 5 or 6 reps, clean reps. It's ridiculous. But I almost think I am very hard on the end on my hamstrings for very low MRV. Like, I think that my MRV for my hamstrings is like 10 sets. And my MEV is probably like 6 sets. So it's going to depend on the muscle group, the exercise, all that sort of thing. But I would say a decent rule of thumb is the closer your reps in reserve are to failure, the more you can expect a decrease in performance across subsequent sets, which is also a reason why I like using reps in reserve and why I think like an average of a couple of reps in the tank is a good idea, because I think it helps you maintain performance across sets without having to drop off performance a lot to help you achieve a sufficient level of performance and volume across all your sets so you can continue to make progress. And that is where I'm going to leave it today. Make sure to drop your questions below. Drop this bad boy a like, and I will see you in the next one.